Good evening. You have found Impossible VHS. If you are not sure how you got here, that is probably fine. Most things worth finding do not have clear directions. Every Sunday night, we open the archive. The archive contains stories from places that do not exist anymore, from timelines that went sideways, from worlds that were built quickly and on a budget, and with the best intentions, more or less. This is Chapter 2 of Impossible VHS.
Are you headed to the correct location?
Listen, you bucket of bolts. I am still on my way to... Buckle up, audience.
Also, you have not called your mother recently.
Take your time with this one. The story rewards it. This is Impossible VHS. I am glad you are here. Impossible VHS. Book 1. Warehouse Blue. Season 0. Side A. Chapter 2. Mike. Mike made it to the launch coordinates with approximately 1 minute to spare. The coordinates resolved as a country road 3 miles northeast of the water tower, Hookmas Woods Road, specifically named after a stretch of land that had stopped being useful when the river flooded 4 years ago and had not become useful again since. Nobody drove down Hookmas Woods Road anymore. There was no reason to. Ping Thought gave him directions.
Left. Ahead, 300 feet. You have arrived.
From where he parked the Civic. Mike thought it felt exactly like a treasure map. 15 paces northeast, turn right, 8 paces, turn left, 5 paces, turn right, then a sound, not a notification, not a ding, more like the specific mechanical sound of something unlocking that had been waiting a long time to be unlocked. It was not much of a ship to look at. Mike had, in the 30 seconds he stood outside it, cycled through every piece of science fiction he had ever consumed, and arrived at the honest conclusion that the ship looked nothing like any of them. It was boxier than he expected. There were no obvious thruster housings, no visible rocket components, no sleek angles suggesting speed. The windows were placed in ways that seemed more like whoever designed the interior had needed light in specific spots and worked outward from there. It looked like an RV, and a trailer house had been engineered by someone who had read about both without seeing either, and had made sensible decisions throughout. It looked, he would think later, like Glenn had picked it out. The back bay door was open, a ramp extending at an angle steep enough that Mike immediately thought about whatever he was going to have to push up the ramp for deliveries. He hoped there was hover technology. He was already breathing hard, just looking at the incline. Inside the cargo bay was the size of a 10 by 10 storage unit. Functional. No wasted space. On one side, a hallway ran toward the front of the ship, narrow the way his friend's old trailer had been narrow single file, turned sideways at the elbows. On the other side, half a dozen small rooms, each with a different logo stenciled above the door, and what appeared to be name placards, the kind that could be slid in and out of a plastic holder. Most of the placards were empty. One of them had a name on it. Ping Thought buzzed with the specific energy of an app that had somewhere to be. Mike looked at Glenn's room for exactly one more moment. Neat. Organized. The kind of organized that came from someone who had a specific place for everything and had never once deviated from the system. then turned and followed the hallway to the front. "I guess I'm the new Glenn," he said out loud, to nobody. The cockpit was not what he expected either. No banks of switches, no blinking arrays, no screens full of things he would need years of training to understand. Instead, there were moderate displays, responsive surfaces that felt more like a very large phone than a control panel, and a specific port in the center console that Ping thought clearly recognized because the device practically leaned toward it. He plugged Ping thought in. The ship woke up. Things vibrated, briefly and purposefully, the way things vibrate when they're completing a checklist rather than malfunctioning. The displays populated. The ramp retracted. The bay door closed with the sound of something sealing correctly. Ping thought said,
Initiating launch sequence. Please follow displayed prompts.
Mike followed the displayed prompts. It was, he thought, significantly less difficult than some video game tutorials he had completed. Ping thought told him what to press, and he pressed it. And the things that were supposed to happen happened in the order they were supposed to happen.
Most creatures who have not previously operated space-capable vessels
Ping thought said, while Mike pressed things.
achieve basic competency within 3 flights and manual proficiency within approximately 20. There will be tutorials.
"Oh, will there?" Mike said.
There will, Ping thought confirmed. 17 of them. The first begins in approximately 4 minutes.
Mike looked at the displays. "Is one of the tutorials about landing?" he said.
Tutorial 9.
Ping thought said.
We will address landing in Tutorial 9.
"What's tutorial 1?" Mike said.
Takeoff.
Ping thought said. "Right," Mike said. The ship lifted. The thing about space, Mike would think later, is that nobody tells you about the smell. He'd expect it if he was honest, and the version of himself at 19 with the star charts and the carefully annotated textbooks would have been embarrassed by how specifically he'd expected this something. Some moment of transition. Some physical acknowledgement from the universe that what was happening was significant. What he got instead was Ping thought saying,
Merge left in 300 feet.
and then a sensation like going over a hill too fast, the stomach drop kind.
That feeling you just experienced is called a tickle belly. If a tickle belly happens quickly and you are unable to preform the maneuver needed, please press the auto button.
And then he was somewhere else. The somewhere else looked at first like a truck stop. It was the size of several truck stops, stacked and rearranged. And the vehicles parked outside it were not trucks in any configuration he recognized. And the sky above it was the wrong color, in a way he couldn't immediately identify, except that it was wrong. And the signage was in scripts he couldn't read, except for one sign near the entrance that said, in English,
Restrooms, non-standard.
Ping thought helped, which he found both reassuring and alarming. Ping thought said,
You have arrived at Way Station or Veth 7. Proceed to Bay 14 for package collection. Customer rating window opens upon delivery confirmation. Maintain a 4.7 or above to retain access to non-standard zone jobs.
What happens if I go below 4.7? Mike said.
You are returned to standard zone jobs.
Ping thought said.
Standard zone jobs do not include dimensional travel supplements.
So I lose the hazard pay?
Correct.
What's the hazard? Ping thought paused. Not the processing kind of pause. The other kind.
That information is available in your onboarding documents, it said.
I didn't get onboarding documents.
They were attached to your contractor agreement.
The thing I signed on the tablet at the gas station.
Correct.
I didn't read it.
Most contractors don't.
Ping Thought said, with what Mike was already identifying as its characteristic tone, not quite sympathy, not quite judgment, the exact emotional register of an automated system that has been given a personality setting and left on medium. He found Bay 14. The package was large, crated, labeled in 3 scripts and 1 diagram that appeared to show something either being carefully contained or carefully released, depending on which way you oriented it. A handler in a vest that said Orveth Logistics handed him a scanner, scanned the crate, handed him a copy of the manifest, and walked away before Mike could ask any questions. The manifest was 4 pages. The item description on page 1 said,
Miscellaneous, organic, stable, pending verification.
Mike loaded the crate into the ship, which had apparently made the transition to non-standard space without complaint.
Did you just suffer a tickle belly?
Ping Thought said, concerned. Mike responded, "Why does it have such a silly name?"
It was a colloquial thing I picked up on Earth and cross-referenced. Its actual name is molecular destabilization upon reintegrating.
Tickle belly works. The delivery address resolved on Ping Thought's screen. It was 40 minutes away. The route went through 2 more way station corridors and something labeled
Transitional buffer zone, reduce speed.
He pulled out of Bay 14. The corridor between way stations was a long tube of engineered atmosphere connecting 2 way station clusters. The walls transparent enough to show the actual void on either side. Mike had known, intellectually, what the void looked like. He had studied it. He had the mathematics of it. He knew the composition of the interstellar medium, the distribution of dark matter, the specific wavelengths of light that traveled through it, and what they meant about the objects that had emitted them. He had spent 6 years turning the void into numbers, and the numbers into understanding, and the understanding into a graduate thesis that his advisor had called
technically proficient and somewhat joyless.
Which was the most accurate description of his late graduate school period that anyone had ever produced. He had never been in it. The void on either side of the corridor was the void. Not a photograph of it, not a simulation. The actual dark, the actual cold, the actual distance measured in units that made human problems feel appropriately sized. And in it, visible through the transparent walls of the corridor, were stars. Mike made his way through the little transparent tube. "None of this feels real?" he again said to no one. Now traveling back in the safety of the ship with the crate in the boot of the ship. His mind kept wondering. Later, as if summoned by thinking about the joyless parts of grad school that he could not stop thinking about, Mike blurted out, "I need a minute." Mike pulled over. He was not supposed to pull over. There were no pullover lanes in a way station corridor, Ping Thought said.
Your delivery window closes in 34 minutes.
And Mike said yeah, and pulled over anyway, and got out of his seat. He stood in the ship's weird window and looked. He knew these stars. Not all of them from this angle. At this distance, the familiar constellations were rearranged, pulled apart, their component stars distributed, in 3 dimensions rather than projected flat against the sky the way they looked from Earth. But the stars themselves, the individual stars, the ones he'd spent years cataloging and measuring and understanding, he knew them. There was Betelgeuse. Red, enormous, unstable, somewhere between 500 and 600 light years from Earth, depending on the measurement. He had written about Betelgeuse in his first year. He had argued in a seminar that its variability was more interesting than its eventual supernova because the variability was happening now, in real time, in a star he could point to. He could point to it now. He pointed to it. From this position, it was slightly above and to the left of where it appeared in Orion from Earth's surface. He could see and could calculate the parallax shift in his head. The way his position had changed relative to the star, the geometry of it clean and satisfying the way geometry was always satisfying when it described something real. He was looking at Betelgeuse from a different angle. He was looking at a star he had spent years studying from a position no human had ever studied it from. I guess no human he knew anyway. He stood in the corridor for a long moment. He took out his phone, took a photo of the corridor, of the stars visible through the window, of Betelgeuse slightly above, and to the left of where it appeared from Earth, where it had always been, where it always would be. He sent it to Glenn. No caption. Glenn's response came 40 seconds later.
I wasn't allowed to tell you what the job was.
I thought you might want to look again.
I'm sorry it took so long.
Mike stood in the corridor and read this. Read it again. He thought about 8 months of food delivery and $39 and the photo in his jacket pocket that he'd been carrying around but not looking at. He thought about the memo and the hours and Glenn saying yes before Mike finished reading it and Mike walking out. He thought about the couch and the tea and the clock running 11 seconds fast and neither of them saying anything about any of it. He thought about the fact that Glenn had put this job in the feed, had adjusted the visibility parameters or whatever contractors did, had engineered the right moment the way Glenn engineered everything quietly, thoroughly, without being able to say so directly. He stood there for 4 minutes, then typed, "Yeah, okay." Then, "Thanks." He put the phone in his pocket. Ping Thought said,
Your delivery window closes in 31 minutes.
Mike looked at Betelgeuse for 3 more minutes. Then he got back in the seat and headed west. "I guess this is west," he murmured to himself. He didn't say anything else about it. He wasn't sure he had the words for it anyway. It wasn't wonder exactly. Wonder was too clean, too simple for what it was. It was more like recognition. The specific quality of finding something exactly where you knew it would be after a very long time of not looking. He had known where it was. He had just never been here before to check. He drove. 40 minutes later, he delivered.
Miscellaneous. Organic, stable, pending verification.
To a squat building at coordinates that didn't correspond to anything on any map, where a being of indeterminate shape signed for it with an appendage and gave him a 4.9 rating, with the note "fine, I guess." Ping Thought sent a notification.
Job complete. Earnings deposited. 3 new jobs available in your area. 1 is flagged hazardous.
Mike sat in the parking lot of the squat building, under the wrong sky with the stars still visible in the daytime, and thought about Glenn back at the Globe Star station in Carthage, behind his counter of misshapen sunglasses and lottery tickets. He thought about the checking account. He accepted the hazardous one. By the end of the week, he had a 4.8 rating, a recurring job in something called Corridor 9 that paid well enough to cover rent with some left over, and a growing suspicion that the universe, whatever else it was fundamentally a logistics problem that nobody had ever fully solved. He had also, in the spaces between jobs, been doing something he hadn't planned on doing. Looking. Not at the jobs. At everything else. The wrong-colored skies above way stations. The specific quality of light in non-standard zones. The stars visible through corridor walls at angles that shifted his understanding of distances he'd memorized years ago. He had a notebook, a physical one, spiral-bound, the kind he'd used in graduate school, that he'd found in his glove box under 3 months of gas station receipts. He'd been writing things in it. Not systematically. Just when something struck him. Coordinates, observations, calculations he did in his head because the math was still there, had always been there, was apparently going to keep being there, regardless of what he did about it. His advisor had called his thesis
Technically proficient and somewhat joyless.
The notebook was not joyless. He didn't examine that too closely. He called Glenn on Thursday. "It's actually space," he said.
I know,
Glenn said. "It looks like space. From up here. It looks like what I thought it would look like." There was a pause. Glenn said,
how's the pay?
"Better than home."
That's something.
"Is it always like this? The jobs?"
Mostly.
Glenn said.
Sometimes worse, occasionally different. Never really better.
Mike looked out at the corridor he was parked in. Engineered atmosphere at a lonely way station cluster. Transparent enough to show the actual void, the actual dark, and the actual stars in it. Cold and permanent, and exactly where they'd always been. He had pulled over in a corridor like this 3 times in the past week. He hadn't told anyone. "Glenn," he said.
Yeah.
"Why are you still at the gas station?" A pause. Longer this time.
My ride got cancelled.
Glenn said.
When I signed you up, contractor thing, I'm waiting on a rescheduled pickup.
"How long's that going to take?"
They said 2 to 4 weeks.
Glenn said.
That was 11 months ago.
Mike didn't say anything.
It's fine,
Glenn said.
The hours are regular. They're talking about making me assistant manager.
The stars were doing what stars do, which is nothing, which is everything, which is just existing at distances that make human problems feel appropriately sized. Betelgeuse was out there somewhere, 500 to 600 light years, red and unstable, and variable in ways that were more interesting than its eventual supernova, because the variability was happening now. He could point to it from here. "I'll figure something out," Mike said. I'll come back through. We can..."
It's fine,
Glenn insisted. The way people say things are fine when they have decided that fine is the available option and have made their peace with it.
Go do your jobs, Mike.
Mike did his jobs. He pulled over in corridors sometimes and looked at stars he knew from different angles. He wrote things in the notebook. He kept his rating at 4.8, He did not think about the thesis. He thought about the notebook instead, which was a different thing, and he was not going to examine how different or why. The universe was a logistics problem nobody had ever fully solved, and he was driving through it. And the stars were exactly where they were supposed to be, and he knew where all of them were. That was enough. For now, that was enough.
That was chapter 2.
You want me to say tickle belly again?
I'm good. Tune in again next Sunday when we open up the archive again. Subscribe if you want to know what Glenn does next week working the night shift.
You could tell them you know.
I said no time travel nonsense in the outro.